Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month I am looking at stories on resilience, making this week's book an absolute classic and authority on the subject, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. He has a middle initial, Viktor E. Frankl. The accompanying cocktail is an Optimist, which is 50 milliliters of white rum, 30 milliliters of sherry, 15 milliliters of lime juice, 15 milliliters of simple syrup, 2 dashes of Peychaud's bitters. And the glass is prepared ahead of time with grapefruit juice and activated charcoal on the rim, so that should be interesting. So let's do this. 50 of rum, 30 of sherry. Okay. So Viktor Frankl is one of the millions of victims and one of the fewer survivors of Hitler's concentration camp system during World War II. He survived in 4 different concentration camps, specifically Theresienstadt, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the big one, Kaufering, and Turkheim, which is actually part of the Dachau complex. So it's the other really big one that everybody hears about. 2 of the smaller ones, 2 of the bigger ones, and he survived them all. His story is somewhat singular in that Frankl had a visa to leave Austria. He had actually been granted permission. He had the visa in hand to come to the United States, and he ultimately opted not to. And he chose not to and allowed the visa to lapse because, in his words, he needed to honor his mother and his father. It's one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments: honor thy mother and thy father. Neither of whom were able to get such a visa and were certainly destined for the camps, which at this point were a well-known fact. I mean, they were no longer just rumors and myths. Everybody knew the camps existed and what was going on at the camps. This choice, while sentencing Frankl to the camps, allowed him to be with his father when his father passed and to provide some comfort in that time. I think I read that he was able to procure morphine for his father, who was quite ill. So... And that's a choice he made. Would he do it again retrospectively? Who knows? I mean, he, quite possibly because, again, his father, right? He was able to be there at the time that his father needed him. So the first part of the book consists of Frankl giving kind of a brief synopsis of his time at the camps and what he learned there about humanity in general. He starts by talking about... They actually called for very fancy cane syrup. I feel like it's just simple syrup. That's all it is, so I'm not doing anything fancy there. What he learned, so he starts by talking about the delusion of reprieve, which, it's the shock upon arrival, right? And you might be aware vaguely of just how bad it is. Like I said, the rumors were no longer rumors. Everybody was aware the camps were there, that the Jews were being rounded up and slaughtered en masse. They were aware of that. But you still arrive at this fantasy of reprieve, this belief that this isn't really happening to you, right? Like you'll get there and somebody will say, oh, sorry, this was our mistake. You were not meant to be here. We're sorry. Let us let you go. Here's your ticket back to, Austria or, Berlin or wherever you were from. Now, obviously, there's a reason that's a delusion. Never happened, not once. Once you were on the train, basically your fate was set. That has sealed the deal. There is no escape from that point on. Oh, Peychaud's bitters. Let's not forget the bitters. And this delusion was encouraged to a degree at Auschwitz by the guards, who had inmates who greeted the new arrivals that were especially chosen and cared for to maintain calm and order, to give the illusion that this was just a work camp. He also provided that the inmates who actually ran the crematoriums were given copious amounts of alcohol to allow them to do their job, and they just drank it down because they were well aware that it wasn't too long before they themselves were in the crematorium and somebody else was drinking the liquor. Shake this up. So they had these inmates that would greet them right off the train that were better cared for, well kept, and it was really dark. It reminded me of a meme I saw just the other day about Judas goats, which are goats that are kept alive, healthy, and well-fed, and calmly lead the other goats and or sheep to the slaughterhouses, which is really, really dark if you think about it. I'll see if I could find the meme. I'll throw it up here if I find it. It was absolutely delightful. I was like, wow. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still going to eat meat, but wow. This delusion is harshly shattered very shortly after arrival. I mean, everybody arrives, they get checked in, they're sent to the left or to the right, and if you're sent, one direction, you're going straight to the ovens, the other direction, you're going to be allowed the privilege of living to work as a slave for the Nazis, right? He was obviously allowed to live, and his delusion was shattered that night, so, less than 12 hours after arrival. Frankl made an inquiry about a colleague and friend of his who had traveled with him to Auschwitz. And the person asked him in return, was he sent to the left side? And Frankl says yes. And the guy says, well, then you can see him there, and kind of points. Frankl says, where? And he points at the chimney just a few hundred yards off that was sending these column of flame and gray smoke into the sky. And that was his answer. There's your friend. He's no longer with us. If he went to the left, he was sent directly there. So on that cheery note, let's try an Optimist. Still not sure about the charcoal rim. Activated charcoal is generally safe for consumption. And that tastes fine, but that's freaking me out. Anyways, that shadows the delusion of reprieve. Clearly there is no reprieve. And the activated charcoal doesn't taste like anything. It just, makes my teeth white, so there's that. And it's messy as hell. I got black charcoal everywhere now. Looks like a briquette exploded on my desk, so happy days. I'll be cleaning here anyways. So gallows humor becomes normal, as well as curiosity. And it's not curiosity of, it's not the curiosity of like, oh, what is that bird there? Or what is this plant? Is today my last day? What's going to happen next? Will I see another day after this? So it's a dark curiosity. It's withdrawn, more of a, well, what the hell else? How much worse can this get? Kind of curiosity. So how did Frankl combat phase 1? Humor. And not gallows humor. I mean, I'm sure there was plenty of that. If you've been in a dark situation, gallows humor is very much normal. Anecdote from his is, quote, friends whom I have met later have told me that I was not one of those whom the shock of admission greatly depressed. I only smiled, and quite sincerely, when the following episode occurred during the morning after our first night in Auschwitz. And then he tells an anecdote of a friend who snuck into their hut the first night and gave them advice. The advice was to shave daily. This was not a hygiene tip, although it certainly doubles as such because it helps keep the lice at bay. Shaving daily would keep their faces flush with the illusion of good health, thus negating the chance that they would be the next taken to the gas chambers. So, I'm making an Optimist cocktail, despite the very, very heavy, dark topic matter, because Frankl himself was an optimist. He didn't believe in collective guilt, right? He never blamed the rest of the Germans. He tells a story, like this book was initially released in German because rather than immigrating immediately after release from the camps, he set up shop in Austria, which is where he was from initially. And one woman approached him, and God, in the early, pre-fours of the white liberal saviors, like, how can you bear to write a book in German, that horrible language that was Hitler's language? And he said, well, do you have knives in your kitchen? And she said, yes. And he said, well, how can you bear to use them given how many people have been murdered with knives? And she stopped complaining about his use of German, so I guess it's mission accomplished. So, but that's the kind of humor he has. It's very tongue-in-cheek, very obvious, and very much don't blame everybody for the actions of one. Each man or woman is only responsible for their own actions. He didn't believe in collective guilt. I'm already loving this man. I should have just done black lipstick to hide the charcoal. The second phase that inmates passed into after the, delusion of reprieve was apathy. They failed to care about anything as the shock of what was happening wore off and just kind of left them numb to the reality. When they would, rather than looking away when various petty tortures were inflicted on their fellow inmates, they would just watch what was being done. I guess if you can bear to have it happen, then I can bear to watch it and watch your suffering so I can tell a tale. But there's apathy there too. And he overcame this apathy. A lot of them overcame apathy by thinking about their loved ones, wondering where they were, if they were faring well, or if they had already crossed over and were beyond pain. He thought about his wife. Love pulled him through. And, quote, for the first time in my life I saw the truth, as it is set out into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth, that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. That salvation of man is through love and in love, end quote. No wonder so many people spend so much time trying to find it. And of course, humor. Humor saw him through some of the darkest times. Charcoal everywhere. The third psychological phase was not happiness when they were liberated. I mean, happiness, I'm sure, comes way later after the shock wears off and you found yourself actually surviving the horrors that happened. The third psychological phase was disillusionment and bitterness after liberation, right? So the Americans and Russians, because yes, at this point we were allies with the Russians, roll through, and it's not, yay, I'm free. It's, why did this happen to me? Why did liberation come too late to help whoever the survivor has lost? Right? Remember, Anne Frank died just weeks before liberation of her camp. Why? Right? And it's here that Frankl hits on one of Nietzsche's most famous sayings. He who has a why can bear any how. I always get nervous with these really delicate glasses, because what if the lid falls off and breaks my glass, and then I'm going to have alcohol all over my desk? With all of this in mind, he was able to write Man's Search for Meaning in like 9 days. Now, he had already written the book once, like truly. It was with him when he arrived in Auschwitz. That is the book he had written. Now, obviously, that book did not include his camp experiences, but like everything else, when inmates checked in, everything was confiscated and lost upon arrival. And part of his why, his overwhelming why, was to get this book out there. Logotherapy. Right? He was a doctor of psychiatry, and logotherapy is part 2 of the book. Now, what is logotherapy? And that is the real question, right? Now, Freud's psychoanalysis was all the rage when Frankl was released from captivity, so he had to carve out his own niche here. And he would tell people he was not a psychoanalyst, but rather a psychotherapist. Logotherapy, quote, focuses on the meaning of human existence as well as on man's search for such meaning. He who has a why can bear any how. So start with your will to meaning. Find your purpose, or more specifically, it's the desire to find purpose and significance. What is the meaning of your life? Why are you here? And yes, that can absolutely include, why did this happen to me? What meaning will you find in the things that happened to you? Amanda Knox mentions reading this book when she was in prison in Italy, and I think her overall meaning was to remain kind. Fucking brutal. How do you remain kind given all the shit, right? But people who've experienced true trauma, that is often the most powerful thing they can find, because it helps them to retain their own sense of humanity. Desire to remain kind is what allowed her to form such a connection and bond with her prosecutor, which remains mind-blowing to me. Clearly, I'm tearing up again. So part 2 is freedom to will. You have a choice in how you respond in any situation. I mean, that's stoicism right there, right? You choose how you respond to a situation. Frankl saw this in spades in camp. I think, God, can I find the quote? Because it was such a good quote. I was like, holy shit. So it was very, very near the end of the book. Yeah, I tagged that out just right. Sigmund Freud once asserted, let one attempt to expose a number of the most diverse people uniformly to hunger. With the increase of the imperative urge of hunger, all individual differences will blur, and in their stead will appear the uniform expression of the one unstilled urge. Then he says, thank heaven, Sigmund Freud was spared knowing the concentration camps from the inside. His subjects lay on a couch designed in the plush style of Victorian culture, not in the filth of Auschwitz. There, the individual differences did not blur, but on the contrary, people became more different people. People unmasked themselves, both the swine and the saints. And today, you no longer need to hesitate to use the word saints. Think of Father Maximilian Kolbe, who was starved and finally murdered by an injection of carbolic acid at Auschwitz and was canonized in 1983. Starvation, hunger, adverse trying times makes you more of who you are. If you're a bitter, angry, wretched person, then that's going to bring that out of you more. Or you can do what Alexander Solzhenitsyn did and flip a 180 and go, wait a minute, my own actions, my own behaviors brought me here. How can I ensure this doesn't happen again, not just to me, but to anybody? I need to expose this. It makes you more of who you are. And for Amanda Knox, it made her more kind. For Viktor Frankl, well, he's Jewish, so he's not going to be sainted. He should be. So yeah, you choose how you respond in any situation. And this is what Frankl saw in the camp. Some chose cruelty. Some became capos, the inmate guards, the ones who were destined to die themselves but would cling to life by being as cruel as they could to the others who were imprisoned with them, in hopes of currying favor with their Nazi overlords. Far more chose kindness. and chose to help those when they could. Meaning in suffering is the next one. And to be clear, Frankl does not believe suffering a la prison or concentration camps is required for this. I mean, specifically, he says of suffering, quote, if it is avoidable, the meaningful thing to do is to remove its cause, for unnecessary suffering is masochistic rather than heroic. Which is why I'm like, would he make the same choice knowing what he knew after the fact to not take the visa? And I think he would have, because of the religious precept, as stated above, honor thy father and thy mother. For him, I think the camps were unavoidable because he needed to be there for his parents. Don't know that his parents necessarily agreed, although religiously they were probably like, well, he's a dutiful son. But if you can remove the source of your suffering, so if it's avoidable, the meaningful thing to do is remove its cause, if you can avoid it. There's nothing wrong with avoiding suffering. I can't help but wonder, what would he make of the current trend towards martyring yourself on the pyre of victimhood? I mean, my God, social media truly is the most devastating thing to happen to our planet since the concentration camps and since the Gulag Archipelago. Like, no joke. Like, I feel like whenever computers were invented, we should go back to that point in time and be like, let's not. This is going to lead to a whole lot of dumb and create the dumbest timeline. Like, somewhere out there's a multiverse where the computers never happened and they're all living their best lives right now, because this is not it. We live in the dumbest fucking timeline right now. And now at the end of the book, and especially I say this, the pyre of victimhood and all that, especially I say this because at the end of the book, before we go into the afterword written by another author, he discusses criminals and how they hate being seen as victims. People try and excuse it, well, he did this because he was a victim of abuse when he was a child. And that deprives them of any chance of accepting responsibility for their own actions. And he talks about a group of hardened criminals who found logotherapy, and after that, after accepting that responsibility, yes, I did this, they never went back to prison because they were allowed agency. They took agency. I shouldn't say allowed. I should say they took their own agency into their hands. I did this. I caused this pain and suffering on somebody else, and I don't want to do that again. I want to be a better person. Accepting that responsibility is huge. All right, that's resilience. That makes sure you don't repeat old patterns that are bad for you. This book was powerful. I mean, you cannot help but be horrified by the experiences at camp. And he was very brief in his experiences. As he said, there are hundreds of books out there, probably thousands in the 70 years since the camps were liberated, that explain what happened and how bad things were in camps. Hell, I have a couple. God, I'm getting charcoal all over my face. Well, it's really good for your skin too, so that's good. I'll close my pores up or something. All right, this cocktail's good, but I can't recommend the charcoal rim because what a mess. Oh my God. There are literally hundreds of thousands of books of the concentration camps, and more released every year, because it is a subject that never fails to fascinate with how darkly traumatic humanity can be to each other, how horrible we can be to each other. And what meaning do you find in that? I mean, most of us think that, no, we never want that to happen again. And that's the rise of Antifa. And okay, I get that. I do. It's admirable to not want to do that again. But when they then say, oh, well, we'll put the Nazis in camps, let them see how they like it, well, I feel like you missed the point. The point isn't to do unto others as they would do unto you. It's to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Would you have them put you in camps? No? Well, then why would you put them in camps? This is not a tit for tat, eye for an eye, kill them before they kill me thing. Kindness, treating your fellow human with decency is what we should all strive for. I am preaching, man. I am on a soapbox today. Let's down some of this. So you can't help but be horrified by the experiences of the camps. But what he pulled out of that, I mean, how many people he helped before his own death at 92 years old? He died in 1997, and he saw the entire 20th century. His gift of logotherapy. I mean, the copy of the book I have is the 2006 version. The foreword is written by Rabbi Harold S. Kushner, who points out that the foreword to the 1962 edition, which would be like the third year of publication for the English printing, was written by a prominent psychologist, Dr. Gordon Allport. And whereas this 47th year printing is written the foreword is written by a holy man, that's different. All right, this book crosses the spectrum from psychology to spiritualism. I think you need both to be a fully integrated person. Mankind needs spiritual guidance to see his way into the future. I mean, a serious lack of godhood, whatever God may be for you, right? Whoever that God force may be for you, is lacking in humanity today. And it makes us all decidedly less human. Meaning is found in the holy places, whatever that may be for you. And in love, right? Love is the highest power. The book ends with an anecdote about Frankl, which was written in the afterword by William J. Winslade. Frankl was asked in one sentence what the meaning of his life was. So he wrote his answer down, then asked his students to guess what he had said. And one of the students guessed spot on. They said, quote, "The meaning of your life is to help others find the meaning of theirs," which is exactly what he had written. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.